Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the final Lunch with Lucy of 2022. My name is Kate Remillard, and I'm on the marketing team at VH2 Studios and your co-host today for Lunch with Lucy. We have a very special guest, but before we get started, just want to remind you that we welcome your questions. The more questions, the better for our guest. Add them to the Q&A box on your screen. We'll have time at the end of the show for those. You'll also see a few poll questions pop up during the show, so be sure to participate. We want to know your answers to those questions, and we'll show those results live as we go. And then at the end of the show, we will announce the 5 winners of our $25 DoorDash gift cards. You must be present to win, so stick around to the very end for that. I did put Lucy's YouTube channel, the URL, in the chat. I'll add that again a little bit later. So subscribe, look at all of her content. She has a great interview actually with Paul on there as well. So that, I think, wraps up my announcements, and I'll hand it right over to Lucy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. And yes, we had a great interview, great meeting with Paul in October, at the end of October, and it was all about, and that's what really moved me to invite Paul as my guest, because it was fascinating. I came there for just 30 minutes, and then I stayed there, I think, for 2 hours. So it was so interesting, so it was a discovery channel for me. So it was really, really great. And Paul Adler, he's a chief strategy officer at Rent Commercial. And Paul's interview, the recording of the interview is at the YouTube channel at Get Real with Lucy. And if you just go to that playlist, you will find it there. So Paul, so nice to see you again. Welcome to Lunch with Lucy talk show.
Well, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Kate. And I cheated a little bit. I had lunch before I came on, and so I didn't want to be eating on Lunch with Lucy and get things in my teeth. But I'm so excited to be here, and we got such great feedback from our interview, and it's really exciting. And I'm so glad that your show is expanding into the commercial world and exploring all that commercial real estate has to offer to our listeners.
Yeah, and I would like to start with commercial and residential real estate. Everyone understands that it's slightly different, different regulations, different approaches. You have to have different education. However, you mentioned, which just kind of stuck with me, if residential real estate very established and regulated, commercial is wild, wild west. So let's start with that, Paul. Expand it to your to how you see it.
Well, it is the Wild West, Lucy, in many regards. The commercial field is, both are real estate, but it's like cats and goats. They're both animals, but they're very different animals. And I have an enormous respect for those in the residential world. It's my 42nd year in real estate. I've never sold a residential property, including my own properties, because I don't know how to. And I think, quite frankly, that the residential real estate world is probably more difficult than the commercial world. But those differences are punched up because folks, the needs that people have in the commercial world are very, very different than the residential needs. And so we really don't get into a lot of emotion or feelings, but rather get into more hard facts, zoning, planning, the type of building, traffic, and a lot of other considerations. And so my buyers can walk into a building and say, this is awful, we're going to tear this down, we're going to put this up, we're going to move this, and no one gets insulted. In the residential world, as I've heard, you very much can't come in and start criticizing someone's home. You sort of have to discuss that with the broker privately. And the commercial inventory is far less than the residential inventory. So And also in the residential world, someone likes a house, someone's qualified to buy the house, they buy the house, and the transaction happens in a fairly quick time frame. The average time frame in commercial is probably a 9-month ramp up. You know, it's a full pregnancy, it's a full term pregnancy before you get to closing. So that's tough, and you have to deal with a lot of different factors that go into it.
And you were talking about how, and I totally understand the logic of it. Oh, here is the statistics. What percentage of business commercial? So 33%, very nice. Very, very nice. 10%. Yeah, very great statistics. I'm so happy to see that. And you were talking about how commercial follows residential. Everyone thinks a different way. Oh, Amazon wants to open a storage here, or someone wants to open some kind of factory as an example. But no, it's not really like that. It's totally different. And then residential follows. In the way you explained to me, it was completely different. Commercial follows residential.
It's an absolute real estate maxim. Commercial entities, particularly the national entities, don't go to an area and then hope that they can find a workforce or hope that they can build a community around the company store. That you know, or a company town. That's turn of the century stuff. But right now, when one of the national leaders wants to come into a community, they look at the demographics of the community, they look at the housing stock, they look at the education, they look at a whole host of factors. And so the folks that Howard Hanna ran Realty are probably tired of me hearing me say this, but residential is the leader, commercial follows residential, and that's why it's so important that you know we see the kind of growth that we've seen, particularly in the New York area, outside the city of New York, where since the pandemic, folks have understood that the commercial folks have understood that they can locate even further outside the city of New York than they ever thought they could, because these are wonderful communities filled with well-educated people who have a host of amenities, cultural, recreational, and communal, that make the workforce the desirable workforce that these companies want. So it's really important that our commercial agents understand what's going on in the residential world, because that will drive what happens and the kinds of communities that they want to have. It's a very interesting way to look at it. You know, we've always thought that a job would be created and then people move to the jobs, and that is not the case at all. They are looking to move into communities. And if you notice, the tagline at Rand Commercial is building better communities with Rand Commercial. And we really just build onto the better communities that the commercial folks want to come into.
Yeah, and I would love to talk about that in a minute. But right now, I think one of very important questions that everyone is curious about, office space. For example, or some plazas that are dying in front of your eyes, which is very sad. However, the area already has the infrastructure. The area is ready for actually for residential as well. And how, and you were talking very well about that. I think it was just a great topic. How the commercial property that is no longer used as a commercial property going to be turned into residential, and why is it important for a residential realtor to have a good friend and a partner in commercial real estate?
Well, just to start off where you at the last part of your question, and that is so true. The strategic partnerships between residential and commercial are essential for anybody that is really trying to improve their commercial and or residential practice. You know, we at Rand promote a lot of referrals. Why? Folks stay in their lane. They do what they're best at doing, And, there's an old saying, it's better to get 25% of something than wait for 100% of nothing. I would be an absolute failure trying to dip my toe into the residential world. And I've done very well referring residential properties to the appropriate residential agents in the area. I will say this: when you look at office and retail, it will always be commercial, but it will be comprised of many factors and many different disciplines. So in the office building, we're going to see office buildings that are going to house not only residential in addition to the office space, but it may in fact be condotel, a hotel or condo kind of setup where people are living closer to where they may want to work. And so we're going to see a lot of repurposing of real estate. And I think that's the exciting part of it. We're seeing a lot of the existing real estate, whether they are retail locations or office buildings, that are being repurposed. And they're being repurposed in a really dynamic way that's meeting what the new normal is. So in office buildings, we're going to see condotels, we're going to see the kind of exciting live, work, play kind of experience that people will participate in. And in our retail locations, that mega mall is going to be something of a real experience. It's going to have warehousing, it's going to have exhibition space, it's going to have a whole host of experiential type of business coming in there. And you need to do that because we are no longer in a static zoning society where we say single family residential here, multifamily residential here, commercial here. I think we're all going to go back to see that sort of New York City urban design where a lot of things come together as one. And we're starting to see that because we've seen a complete sea change in how business and residential marry each other in the communities that we all live in.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I see it. So if you take this mega mall and you are converting it into condos with maybe some retail space on the first floor, the commercial and the residential agents and realtors have to work together because, like you said, you're not going to sell those condos. You're going to give it to your partner who will take care of it. And the condo is coming. It might not come next year. Maybe it will take 2 years to rebuild. Here in Florida, some buildings are taking 6 years to build, especially now after COVID with shortage of supplies like glass, steel, and cement. But it's still coming. So you need to have that partnership. What about coming back to work? I know that everyone have their opinion and split feelings on whether everyone should be coming back to the office or not. I'm having a lot of interviews, and that's one of my questions. And most of the management and on C-level are saying, I would really love to see my agents back at the office. But you were talking about if you are bringing people back to the office, you have to be ready and you have to build a different environment.
That's correct. Even though we love the culture that we were all in the office, I don't think there was a day I missed going to the office. And before COVID, I don't think I know I didn't have a desk at home to work from. I did not work from home. My office was 10, 15 minutes from the house. And I can tell you there were some nights I went back to the house wearing some pajama. I went back to the office wearing pajama bottoms just to go in and do some work, in a late night and do what I needed to do. And the office was a great place for collaboration, particularly in real estate, where you really get to talk about the area. You talk about the landlords, you talk about the tenants, you talk about the builders, the developers. And I know even on the residential side, even though it was as competitive as the commercial side, there's an enormous amount of camaraderie that you have in the offices. I commend what they're doing at RAND to bring people back, and that is to try to create some activities in the office that are just fun. I don't know that we're ever going to get back to the 5-day-a-week come to the office. But I think that when you come to the office, it's going to have to be a rewarding experience. And the office is going to have to be set up in such a way that encourages that collaboration again. I know, for example, in the New City office, which is one of our flagship offices where I have my main office, the whole area in the middle of the building, Lucy, what you've seen is the lounge. You know, that's this great living room where that people congregate in. It's where they meet. It's couches and chairs and high top tables. That was sort of not done before. You know, it was cubicles and offices, and everybody did that kind of thing. And you went to a meeting room. So I think that people do need to get back to the office because there's a creative juice that's created that when you're together, it also is just better. It's better for the clients. It's better for everybody to do that. Having said that, we're seeing in the office space, in the world of office space, we're seeing that these office buildings have to have medical in them. They have to have daycare in them. They have to have fitness. They have to have a good, not just a vending machine with food, but good food and good coffee and the like. So I think we're starting to sort of see a rebuilding, a repurposing of office, and I think that will be more sustainable in the future. So while I think right now we're in limbo and people aren't sure about getting back in just yet, I think it will happen, and it's really up to the leadership, management, to figure out ways to get folks back in, because people do miss those times when we got together on holidays and special events and celebrated things in the offices and came together when we needed to in other times. It's very comforting to have that work family. If you think about it, you're at work twice as much as you are at home. So I think we need to,
probably more.
probably more, but we need to come back to that we need to create a new balance.
I would like to talk about marketing strategy. So as part of, now we are Metaport family, and Metaport is huge in commercial world. We actually have more commercial clients by far than residential. And being in commercial, we were talking about it, how important it is to have the 3D tour, the 3D video, where you can share it with anyone and everyone, regardless where you're located. But besides the Metaport, other tools are being used, and so would like to talk about that.
Oh, sure. Pre-pandemic, it was don't send me anything. I want to come out and see it for myself. And now, what I'm going to say, pandemic and post-pandemic, hopefully, we're starting to see folks say to us, send us everything that you have, the virtual descriptions and the virtual presentations that you have, before I invest my time to come out and take a look at it. So whether it is LoopNet, Crexi, CoStar, Matterport, Retail Solutions, some of our drone and aerial work that goes on, people are quite interested to see those walkthroughs. They don't necessarily have to go through. If you've got 10,000 square feet of office space and you can give them that sampling, and then they may want to come to the building to just sort of get that live impression of what the building's like. It's a whole different way to market things. And that's why we are urging the agents to jump into that. And not to mention, all of that not only gets shared with the client, but we share it. We have a very aggressive social media program to put stuff out on social media. One thing that we knew real well, and we really were one of the first in the industry to do it, and that was to share with our Property Peak and another successful brokerage, telling folks, hey, this is what's happening. Everybody wants to know what's coming into that empty space on Main Street, what's happening out on the outskirts of town, who's coming in, leaving. And so we think we're providing them with essential information. You know, Lucy talked about the fact that in commercial, the first thing we sell is information. The second thing we sell are people. The third thing we sell is real estate, because you have to be in command of the information. That's what you're selling.
Information, people, and then real estate. Yeah, I totally agree with you. We were talking about future agent and how important it is for everyone to understand. Well, like you had an example, someone was saying, oh, it's commercial zoning. Well, it's not that simple. The future agent has to understand all the details. Just because I want to build a restaurant and it's commercial zoning, it doesn't mean that restaurant will fit there. What about the drive-through? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you know, when someone calls me up and says to me, or God forbid, an agent says it to me, well, it's commercial zoning, I either want to go and strangle them, or it's like fingers on the chalkboard. Zoning is very specific. And while there are many commercial zones, and so you raise a very important point, just because you're talking about something that's commercial doesn't mean that, for example, you would be allowed to have a restaurant in that zone. It doesn't mean that you might be able to have a warehouse in that zone. It doesn't mean you'd be able to have retail in that zone. So all of these zones are specific. The agents must know that. That's the information that they have to know. They have to apply their trade through information and figure things out, and not come up with you know, a pedestrian answer that's, well, you know, there's a restaurant in that area also. Well, there might be a restaurant in the area, but it might also be just outside the zone. Or it might also be a pre-existing non-conforming use. And that's not relevant to what we're talking about today. So that empirical data just doesn't really matter. It's drilling down into the zoning codes and understanding what those things mean. You know, it's how you make these things happen in commercial. And we're a much better resource for a client to be able to go in and say to them, you know, that use is not permitted here, and we might want to refocus them somewhere else, than just to go through the transaction only to find out. You know, in law school, one of the things we learn in law school is if you don't tell your client the bad news up front, you'll never tell them the bad news. And it is a lot better to know what boundaries, what constrictions you're working in, and also then to try to figure out, is there a way to accomplish this? The post-pandemic zoning code is going to have to be dynamic. It is going to have to address multiple needs. The 1950s concentric zoning concepts are really evaporating in front of our faces. So, you know, what did that look like? It looked like a city core, then it looked like a suburban core, then it looked like an ex-urban core. And in those areas, the further out, you had your more industrial uses, and then you had retail uses as you got closer to the city. And then in the city, it was sort of this mixed use because it existed pre-zoning. But our zoning codes, for example, you know, in a business park or a warehouse park, you better have a zoning code that allows you to have a daycare center. You better have a zoning code that allows you to have a place where folks can go and eat and do that. Say, well, they can go out for lunch. Yeah, they got an hour lunch and they got to drive 15 minutes out to get lunch and 15 minutes to drive back. And it becomes stressful or bad weather. So what's happening is these zoning, the zoning codes have to become dynamic and allow for you to have multiple uses, mixed uses. And so, by the way, this is again where residential and commercial agents need to come together and go before the zoning boards and the planning boards and the architectural review boards and say, we need to understand that this is what the modern this is what modern commerce wants. And by the way, there are a lot of folks who have no problem living closer to where they work. And we have to think about workforce housing that addresses those needs as well.
And we have a very interesting comment, but before we go, I just want to stay on the topic and mention how you believe in preserving the society where you live, where you work, where you play. You have the power to protect that environment as a commercial officer, as a commercial realtor, and not implement something that will ruin the neighborhood and actually will affect residential market as well. If you build a waste space plant or something, and then everything that you built for 25 years is going away.
Well, that's true. And that's why it's very annoying when we see folks that are not in this for the long run. You know, Rand Commercial's been around for over 35 years, and we build our business on repeat business, having clients that come back to us over and over again. And the reason we do that is because we're really sensible about what we try to promote going into an area. If you're in it for one deal and you don't really care what you put somewhere, that's reckless. But if you know, I live and work and play in the same area. Our agents do that as well. You know, when we sell Main Street and our agents are selling, and the residential agents are selling where they live, it's because there's a quality of life that you're trying to protect. And so it's very important. And while there may need to be a waste plant put somewhere, it probably shouldn't be put next to a high density residential neighborhood with a lot of kids. You know, perhaps there are other places to put that, and you have to put the you know, the profit motive behind you. You need to turn around and say, you know, that's not something our company can represent. That's not part of our values in the area that we are. I mean, one of the reasons I think Rand and Howard Hanna Rand Realty have been so successful is because everything we do is local. We're not just in a county, or we're not just in an area. We're within a town, we're within a village, we're in a hamlet, and you have to represent the values from where you are. Now, sometimes you may come in conflict in terms of trying to get folks who like things to stay the way they are. If that's not sustainable, then you have to educate them and say, look, folks, we need to get with the times, and we need to do some of this. You may not have to do all of it, but if you look at the communities that you really admire, you will always come back to your own community and say, why can't we do that the way they do that over there? You know, we've all seen that. You know, there are model communities that somehow have multifamily and residential and single family residential and commerce, and everything somehow it mixed together. It looks good, it works, there's a appropriate traffic flow, and we come back and we say, why can't we do that? And so we have to have a sort of a compromise between NIMBY and catch as catch can, and the real estate community is probably has its ear closest to the ground, and that's where residential and commercial agents again need to be involved in their local governments, where the most important police power that government has is that of zoning and planning.
So what are the results of the last poll, Kate? And that just one more time, it just shows you residential and commercial realtors have to be on the same line in the same way. Oh, look at that. So that is great. 56%. Do you keep up to date with the happening? So that's perfect. Thank you.
And there's a great comment in the chat too, exactly on that subject, Paul. You know, just commenting that it's going to be a slow burn as tenants have to wind leases down in these office buildings. Do you have any idea of when that market will reach a critical point? And then on top of that, are you aware of any government support or assistance in making, converting these office buildings into other uses like residential? Is there any assistance out there?
I don't think there's any assistance out there other than having proactive planning and zoning boards and town boards and city councils and village boards that are taking a look and saying to themselves, if we don't act now, we're going to have a big empty building. And that's going to be a drain on the tax rateable system. That's going to cause us a problem. For example, just in Rockland County and Westchester County, in Rockland County, there are two major malls. Both malls are before the planning board in the local town to build multifamily residential and exhibition space, convention space, and maybe include some warehouse space, because they've looked at these big box structures. They've looked, as Lucy pointed out, to the infrastructure, the enormous parking ratios that we have, the ring road systems that service these giant retail facilities. And they've said, we can do some of this, or we can be purists, where perfect is the enemy of the good. And we can say to these folks, nope, we just said it was going to be retail and that's what's going to stay. And the next thing you know, you've got the biggest, gang hangout in the world. And that's not real good. And there's a lot, and then it's very hard to come back from that, rather than repurpose the infrastructure where we are. Same thing in Westchester. They're just taking down they just began the demolition of a major mall in White Plains, and it's going to be a mixed use project. And it's much more sustainable for the community. It'll provide a greater tax base, and it creates a more modern approach to planning. And we need to understand that if pre-pandemic, once you got out of the city of New York, Westchester and Nassau and Suffolk were the first stop. Rockland and Orange counties, maybe that second stop. And after that, it was really considered upstate. And then you went to one of the cities, Albany, Syracuse, or something like that. Well, now Dutchess and Putnam and Ulster counties are hot to the touch, because they have beautiful, healthy, vibrant residential communities. And the commercial folks have turned around and said, hey, look who's moved into Ulster County. Look who's moved into Orange County. Look who's moved into Putnam or Dutchess. We can be there. We never thought we could be there, but we can be there. And that's why we need to always be cognizant of what's happening around us. And, I'd love to see more real estate, both commercial and residential brokers, getting involved and serving on planning boards and zoning boards and architectural review boards and the like.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And not everyone is from New York here, so maybe some of our audience are not familiar with geographically with all our counties, but I am sure it's the same in Illinois and California and in Florida. Everywhere you go, that we all depend on each other, and we just have to support the community and pay back the community. And one of the things that you can do best is, as a realtor, because you have the influence, you have the knowledge, you have your feet are on the ground, you know what's happening, is to work together, commercial, residential, with your local government, and make sure that where you live, where you play, it's a wonderful place, and you are welcoming newcomers. So we're wrapping up. Well, Paul, thank you so much. So what's going on now, Kate? We have our prizes to give away.
Yes, let me announce those winners really quickly here. And then I do want to just give people, Paul, if anybody wants to get in touch, contact you, where can they find you?
They can find me at Rand Commercial at www.randcommercial.com, or on my cell phone at 917-577-0497. And it's paul.adler@randcommercial.com. somehow everybody finds me. So it's out there, and we're always happy. And the only stupid question, Lucy, is what? The one you don't ask. So please call us, ask us. We're happy to be here. We're a resource for anybody. And for all of those folks not from the New York area that are watching, I know you all want to be here. So give us a call and we'll help relocate your business.
Very smart, very smart. Renee likes it.
She knows that.
Thank you, Paul,
Awesome.
so much. Please watch the whole video. I encourage you to go to the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Lucy Edwards VHT, and then Get Real with Lucy. You will have the whole video. We covered more things, giving back to the community, and some other topics. We spoke more about why you need to come back to the office and how the office should look like. So please enjoy. And Paul, thank you, and thank you for joining us. You're not feeling that well, but you are a trooper, and here we are. So
well, Lucy
appreciate
and Kate, thank you so much. It's so important. This is what we talked about first. It's information, and what you do is provide this essential information, all of us, to become better professionals. So thank you so much.